Imagine for a second the most precious thing in your entire life, like your child.
Right. The absolute center of your universe.
Exactly. Now, I want you to imagine that they are violently taken from you, and not by an illness or some tragic accident, but deliberately, by another person.
Just an unthinkable scenario.
It really is. But then, and this is where it gets incredibly dark, a year or two later, the person who took them, or even just society at large, starts selling T-shirts with your murdered child's face on them, like as a fashion statement.
Oh, wow. Yeah, just wearing it casually.
Right. People are literally wearing your ultimate world-ending tragedy to the grocery store. So the question is, how does your soul respond to that?
That is heavy.
It is. And welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, our mission is to unpack an intensely provocative, really heavy set of notes. They're titled From the Mind of Andre. And we're pairing them with this deeply unsettling excerpt called The Cruel Irony of Divine Masks.
Yeah, we are definitely going straight into the deep end today.
We really are. We're exploring human grief, the commodification of tragedy, and a radical reframing of religious symbols that millions of people wear every single day.
It's a journey that forces a complete reevaluation of how we process pain, on a societal level. We're looking at what is essentially a masterclass in challenging comfortable assumptions.
Absolutely. But before we get into the architecture of these arguments, we really need to establish a very clear baseline for you, the listener.
We do, because the source material we're dealing with today contains some fiercely critical views.
Right. Critical views on religion, human violence, and how specific religious groups operate.
Exactly. It specifically points out the hypocrisy of those who use God's name to validate killing.
So we need an upfront disclaimer here. We are not taking a side.
No, not at all.
We are not endorsing a specific theological view, and we aren't condemning any group either. Our role today is strictly analytical.
Right, we're just impartial guides here. We're mapping the terrain of these arguments to help you understand the mechanics of the original text. We're examining the architecture of the claims, not validating them as, absolute universal truths.
Perfect. So, with that established, let's look at the immediate aftermath of that unthinkable loss we started with. When you lose a child to a random act of violence, the response described in our sources isn't melancholy.
No, it's not a quiet, dignified weeping.
Right. It is described as a deafening roar of agony.
A roar that instantly incinerates what we like to call the social contract.
Okay, unpack that a bit. The social contract incinerated.
Yeah, so we walk around every day operating under an illusion, right? A shared agreement that if we are wronged, the state will step in.
The police, the courts.
Exactly. The judges, the penal system. These are the mechanisms we rely on to mediate our grievances. But when you introduce the malicious, unnatural taking of a child, that thin veneer of civilization completely evaporates.
Wow. It just vanishes.
It does. The legal system relies on the assumption that a victim or their family still has a stake in the shared future of society.
Oh, I see.
Right. But when your biological and emotional legacy is violently severed, your stake in that future is gone.
The collateral is gone.
Yeah.
If I don't have my child, I just don't care about your laws anymore.
Exactly.
The source material describes this state of mind as a dark labyrinth where the only exit sign is marked with retribution.
That is such a chilling image.
It really is. And what's terrifying is that this isn't framed as just a temporary bout of anger. It's framed as a permanent cosmic imbalance.
Like a fundamental error in reality.
Yes. You outliving your murdered child is an error in the fundamental physics of the universe, and your entire existence becomes dedicated to correcting that error.
It is a total rewiring of human psychology. Think about the physical and emotional energy required to sustain a normal life.
Right, like working, maintaining relationships, planning for tomorrow.
Yeah, all of that. In the labyrinth of retribution, all of that energy is violently redirected into a single narrowing channel. The world just shrinks.
It collapses.
All the vast complexities of the globe, the billions of people, the cities and landscapes, they all collapse into a very small map.
A map with only 2 points. You and the person who stole your future.
Exactly.
There's a line in the text that describes the grieving parent as being fueled by an inexhaustible fuel.
Inexhaustible fuel.
Yeah, that phrase, it implies a perpetual motion machine of vengeance.
Right. It suggests that the capacity for violence in a parent who has lost a child isn't something that burns out.
It doesn't fade with time at all. It just crystallizes. I mean, think about it. The formal justice system offering a 20-year prison sentence feels like a clerical error. in the face of an inexhaustible fuel.
That's a great way to put it, a clerical error.
It's like trying to put out a forest fire with a spreadsheet.
Because the formal justice system is entirely inadequate for balancing this specific scale, to have one's fill of retribution in this context, to actually reach the bottom of that dark well, is a terrifying concept.
It really is.
It implies a level of violence and pursuit that exists entirely outside the bounds of modern morality. It taps into an evolutionary primal imperative.
You protect your offspring, or you destroy whatever threatened them.
Precisely. There is no middle ground, no mediation, no plea deal that satisfies the biological imperative of a stolen legacy.
But, a parent's primal desire to just burn the world down creates a massive problem for a functioning society.
Oh, absolutely. Society cannot survive that level of raw, unmediated vengeance.
Right. If everyone who was wronged acted on that inexhaustible fuel, the infrastructure of the modern world would collapse overnight. So how does the modern world neutralize that threat?
It sanitizes it.
It turns that raw, dangerous grief into a harmless, marketable product. And this brings us to what the author calls the secondary nightmare.
The transition from private devastation to public commodity, this is where the mechanics of societal coping become truly grotesque.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Imagine the person who killed your child, or even just a corporation capitalizing on the tragedy, taking the face of your stolen legacy and printing it on a t-shirt.
Stamping it onto cheap jewelry.
Yeah. Inking it into skin as a tattoo.
The text actually labels this as a second killing. And I really had to sit with that concept for a while.
It's a harsh term.
It is. Because if I see someone walking down the street wearing a memorial t-shirt with a tragic victim's face and their birth and death dates on it, my immediate cultural conditioning tells me, oh, that person is honoring the victim.
Right, they're keeping the memory alive. That's what we're taught.
Exactly. But the argument here completely dismantles that conditioning.
Yeah.
It views the public display of a victim's face as an intolerable insult.
We have to look at the mechanism of false empathy here. When you turn a profoundly private devastation into a public accessory, you divorce the image from the actual deafening pain of the loss.
The public is just wearing the image casually.
Yes, they are wearing it while waiting in line for a coffee, while laughing at a joke on their phone, while living the mundane life that was violently denied to the victim.
Oh, man.
It is a mocking reminder of the taken life, worn by a public that is entirely insulated from the actual grief of the parents.
It's consumption without comprehension. By buying the shirt or wearing the trinket, the public gets a neurological dopamine hit.
They feel proximal to the tragedy.
Right. They feel like they are participating in a moral good, showing solidarity. But they are completely bypassing the agonizing emotional labor of actually mourning.
They get the aesthetic of the tragedy without carrying a single ounce of the weight.
Which is precisely why the author calls it a desecration. It strips the sacredness, the raw, unbearable reality of the loss, and replaces it with a socially acceptable performance.
It turns an individual's unrepeatable, complex existence into a cheap trinket, a piece of merchandise.
The sacred becomes mundane. Now, to truly understand the sheer horror of this commodification, the source material asks us to do something really uncomfortable. It forces us to take this deeply personal human dynamic of the grieving parent and the murdered child and scale it up.
Scale it up to the absolute highest power imaginable.
Right. It scales it to the divine. We are asked to look at the figure of Jesus, not through the ethereal, detached lens of modern theology, but through the strict, grounded, bloody reality of human imagery.
The perspective shift here is massive. We are so accustomed to the institutional normalization of the crucifixion.
The cross is ubiquitous.
It's on buildings, it's hanging around necks, it's dangling from rearview mirrors. It has become the background noise of Western culture.
But the text says, strip all that away. Strip away 2,000 years of stained glass and choral music. What are you actually looking at?
You are looking at a man who was broken, tortured, and publicly executed by the state.
You are looking at a murder weapon. And humanity has taken the literal instruments of this profound suffering, the cross, the nails, the crown of thorns, and turned them into fashion accessories.
And the pivotal question the author asks is, how do you think his father feels?
Wow. That just hits you right in the chest.
It does. If we accept the premise we just established, that a flawed, earthly parent would unleash an inexhaustible fuel of retribution to defend the honor of their murdered child, what is the reaction of the Creator?
The psychological and theological shock value of this question is profound. It forces you to view the divine relationship through the most agonizing human lens.
It's like imagine walking up to a mother whose son was stabbed to death,
Okay.
and you approach her wearing a bright graphic t-shirt featuring a highly stylized, aestheticized picture of the bloody knife used to kill her son.
Oh my God.
Maybe you even have a little silver charm of the knife on a chain around your neck, and you expect her to smile and thank you for honoring her boy.
That is insane. It is unfathomably cruel.
But the argument posits that God, as a father, experiences that exact same horror and insult every single day when looking at the symbols we casually parade around.
That analogy cuts right to the bone of the argument. Are you honoring the divine, or are you participating in the ultimate, historically scaled version of the commodification of misery?
Are you engaging in a second killing?
By turning the instrument of a child's brutal execution into a trinket, society has scrubbed the gore from the event, making it palatable enough to mass produce.
But the critique gets even sharper. Because it's not just about a generalized insensitivity, it points a very specific finger at who is wearing these symbols and the behavioral loop they are trapped in.
Yes, this is where the excerpt, The Cruel Irony of Divine Masks, comes into play. It highlights the ultimate hypocrisy. Humans are the ones who killed him.
Right. It was a human political establishment, human fear, human hands driving the nails.
Yet humans now wear his face and body as if we are entirely innocent of the act.
The oppressor wearing the mask of the victim. This is a recurring historical phenomenon, but here it is analyzed at its absolute peak.
The text explicitly focuses on those who believe their specific religious path is the sole absolute truth.
Individuals and institutions that are entirely willing to use violence, exclusion, and oppression, even killing in God's name to validate their power, all while wearing the face of the very person they killed.
I mean, how does the human brain manage that cognitive dissonance? You have groups claiming absolute, inflexible authority over life and death. They dictate who belongs and who is cast out.
Which is the exact same behavioral profile of the self-righteous establishment that executed the figure whose image they're wearing on their chests.
Exactly. How do you reconcile killing in the name of someone who was executed by people acting exactly like you?
You reconcile it through the psychological mechanism of unearned innocence.
Unearned innocence.
Yes, the mask provides a cloak. If I am an institution or an individual wearing the ultimate symbol of divine sacrifice and pacifism, I project an aura of unassailable righteousness.
The symbol acts as a shield against criticism.
Exactly. If I wear the face of the ultimate victim, I cannot possibly be the aggressor. Even if my hands are actively causing suffering, the symbol on my chest short-circuits the public's ability to see me as the oppressor.
It's a brilliant, terrifying strategy. The establishment kills the rebel because the rebel threatens their power.
Yeah.
But you can't just bury a martyr. Their memory is too dangerous.
So the establishment does something far more insidious.
They adopt the rebel's face as their corporate logo. They monopolize the moral high ground. And then they use that logo to justify suppressing the next generation of rebels.
And this brings us to the overarching question. How does society let this slide? How do we walk past this staggering, cruel irony every single day without the collective cognitive dissonance tearing the culture apart?
It's not an accident, is it?
No, not at all. Society is actively engineered to ignore it.
Through what the author calls the bureaucracy of distraction. This is where we need to look at the actual machinery of how public memory is managed. The transformation of agony into accessories, the jewelry, the t-shirts, the trending hashtags, is not just a collection of individual tasteless choices.
It is a systemic, emergent property of a society that desperately needs to avoid looking at the truth.
The text calls it the performance of forgetting. Let's dig into how this works on a societal level.
Okay, so when a tragedy occurs, whether it's the execution of a divine figure or a modern localized atrocity, it creates a massive, uncomfortable void.
True. Unadulterated grief is a black hole.
It is. It demands absolute silence. It demands that the machinery of everyday life stops completely so we can stare into the abyss of loss and injustice.
But a modern economy can't afford to stare into the abyss. If everyone truly felt the raw, primal roar of every tragedy, the trains wouldn't run.
Commerce would stop.
Right. We'd be paralyzed by the cumulative weight of human suffering. So the bureaucracy of distraction steps in to manage the crisis.
It manages it by providing what the text calls convenient clutter. The bureaucracy manufactures a substitute for grief.
I love the analogy we were discussing earlier. Think of it like a digital algorithm, right? Imagine a high-resolution, uncompressed image file.
Okay.
That file is massive. It contains every jagged pixel of a human life. the complex history, the unresolved trauma, the terrifying reality of their violent end.
Right. All the messy data.
Exactly. If society tried to load that massive, uncompressed file of grief into its collective server every time a tragedy happened, the system would crash. The bandwidth just isn't there.
So what does the algorithm do?
It aggressively compresses the file. It
Mhm.
takes that high-res reality and crushes it down into a low-res thumbnail, a hashtag, a slogan, a ribbon you pin to your lapel.
And that compression is the mechanism of erasure. The thumbnail doesn't contain any of the actual data of the original life. It's just a pointer. And by interacting with the thumbnail, by retweeting the hashtag or buying the t-shirt, the public feels like they have successfully processed the file. They have performed their duty of remembering.
But in reality, they have performed the act of safely forgetting. They've interacted with the low-res thumbnail, so they never have to look at the high-res horror of the actual event.
The bureaucracy provides these marketable aesthetics as a pressure valve. We buy the merchandise, we get our hit of false empathy, and we go right back to our daily commute.
And this system isn't running itself. The source material introduces the specific entities that oversee this massive compression algorithm, the architects of erasure.
The architects, these are the forces, whether literal corporate entities, media conglomerates, or institutional religious bodies, that view human tragedies strictly as a market opportunity.
They are the grief industry.
Yeah.
And the math they use is just chillin'.
It is. They look at human life in its raw, unfiltered form, and they classify it as a variable. Right. A variable is unpredictable. A person has specific flaws, a strange sense of humor, a messy history of mistakes and triumphs. It is an unrepeatable, jagged shape.
But the architects of profit cannot mass-produce a variable. You cannot build a scalable business model around unpredictable, messy grief.
No, the market requires structural constants, things that can be predicted, packaged, and sold across demographics.
So the architect takes the jagged variable of the human victim and forces it into their machine, crushing it until all the unique edges are sanded off.
It becomes a logo. The variable becomes a constant. And the moment that happens, the true identity of the victim is overwritten.
Okay, but let me challenge this framework for a second. Let me play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
We are painting these architects as malicious villains. But isn't it possible that this compression algorithm, this grief industry, is simply an evolutionary necessity?
How do you mean?
Well, if we didn't have hashtags, if we didn't have sanitized symbols and t-shirts to quickly process trauma, wouldn't we all just go mad? Isn't the lubricant they provide necessary to keep the engine of society from tearing itself apart from the friction of infinite grief?
It is a compelling counterargument. You are suggesting that the architects are actually performing a vital, albeit grim, public service. They are the shock absorbers for the human psyche.
Exactly.
However, the source material explicitly rejects that defense. The argument is that the comfort of the masses does not justify the violation of the individual's truth.
The cost is just too high.
Exactly. The text insists that providing this societal lubricant is a malicious act because it guarantees that the dead are permanently erased.
They are not remembered, they are replaced.
Right. The true, singular truth of their existence is completely overwritten by a brand. The architects are committing an ontological crime. They are stealing the victim's reality so the rest of us can feel comfortable.
So for the author, substituting a sanitized brand for a true memory is an absolute violation, regardless of how much it helps the trains run on time.
Precisely.
So if that defense falls apart, if the bureaucracy of distraction and the architects of erasure are fundamentally violating the truth of the dead to sell us cheap comfort, what is the individual supposed to do?
That's the ultimate question.
How does a grieving parent, or just someone who refuses to participate in this mass forgetting, fight back against a system that controls all the public squares and all the merchandise?
The answer provided is incredibly stark. It outlines a strategy of absolute resistance centered around becoming what the text calls the keeper of the variable.
The keeper of the variable. You refuse the trinket.
Yeah.
It sounds so simple, but the implications are massive.
Yeah.
You reject the cheap jewelry. You refuse to buy the memorial t-shirt. You completely ignore the hollow, trending hashtag.
You deny the architects their constant.
This refusal is the foundation of what the text calls the counter-archive.
The counter-archive.
Right. If the physical world, the public square, and the marketplace are entirely compromised by the grief industry, then you cannot trust any physical object to hold a true memory.
Because the moment a memory takes physical, marketable form, the architects will hijack it.
Exactly. Therefore, the only logical, safe place left to store a pure memory is entirely internal.
The counter archive doesn't live in a storefront. It doesn't live on a billboard. It lives, as the source describes, in the jagged, unrefined, and private friction of the soul.
It is the active, daily refusal to let your lost loved one's life be compressed into a low-res thumbnail.
There's a powerful quote here. I choose to sit in the raw silence that the market fears.
The raw silence that the market fears.
Wow. The market relies on noise. It relies on consumption, on the constant exchange of symbols and aesthetics. Silence cannot be monetized.
You cannot sell merchandise to someone who refuses to speak, refuses to wear the logo, and refuses to participate in the public performance of grief.
By choosing to hold on to the mess, the unpredictable laughter, the specific heavy weight of their actual presence, you are locking the true memory away from the compression algorithm.
You are keeping the variable safe.
You are.
But the sheer loneliness of this stance is staggering. If you become the keeper of the variable, you are choosing to carry the massive, uncompressed, high-res file of someone's existence entirely on your own shoulders.
You are accepting that their absence is a fundamental crater in the earth, a cosmic imbalance that no product, no slogan, and no amount of societal sympathy will ever fill.
To truly honor them is to reclaim them from the industry.
It's an absolute rejection of the modern mandate to move on, to find closure, or to celebrate their life through mass-produced aesthetics. You hold the line against the erasers by holding on to the unbearable friction of the truth.
Man, let's go back and look at the sheer scale of the journey we've just mapped out today.
It's been a lot.
It really has. We started at the absolute bedrock of human emotion, the primal, deafening roar of a parent's grief, where the social contract burns away, leaving only an inexhaustible fuel for retribution.
Right. And then we examined how society, terrified of that primal roar, developed a massive mechanism to sanitize it, the commodification of misery, the second killing.
We then watched that mechanism scale up to the divine, reframing the most ubiquitous religious symbols as instruments of torture, challenging the psychological disconnect of those who wear the victim's mask while acting as the oppressor.
We looked under the hood of the bureaucracy of distraction, exploring the compression algorithms used by the architects of erasure to turn jagged human variables into marketable constants.
And finally, we arrived at the solitary, defiant rebellion of the counter-archive, the keeper of the variable sitting in the unmonetizable silence.
It leaves us in a profoundly challenging place. It forces a question that undermines almost everything we do to remember the dead. Well, if true memory absolutely requires refusing all physical commodification, if any public display puts the variable at risk of being hijacked by the architects, does that mean the only genuine, pure memorials humanity will ever construct are the completely invisible ones?
The ones carried in absolute, agonizing, and perpetual silence.
Exactly.
That suggests that the moment you can see a memorial, it's already been compromised. That is a heavy, heavy paradigm to carry with you.
It is. It really makes you question everything.
It does. We want to thank you for joining us on this intense, deeply philosophical deep dive. It's material that demands we look closer at the world around us, and more importantly, at the mechanisms inside ourselves.
Absolutely.
So, the next time you see a memorial hashtag trending, or you reach out to put on a piece of jewelry bearing a familiar symbol, pause, question the compression of the story. Because out there in the dark, the roar of true agony doesn't care about our neat little aesthetic bandages. It just echoes. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.